Добре дојдовте во емисијата 360 степени на Alsat. Ова издание го реализираме од Охрид, каде во изминатите 2 дена се одржа меѓународната конференција Преспа форум за диалог, инспирирана од договорот од Преспа со кој беше надминато децениското прашање за името на државава. Темата на конференцијата беше Западен Балкан, делот од сложувалката што не достига за комплетирање на Европа. Како што рече вице-премиерот Никола Димитров на еден од панелите, ако се зборува за термин за одржување ваква конференција, ова е најлошиот можен, имајќи предвид дека само пред неколку дена Бугарија повторно го блокираше регионот на неговиот пат кон Европската унија. Димитров силно ја критикуваше Унијата затоа што прашања како идентитетот или историјата станаа важни за земји членки, иако Лисабонскиот договор ја слави токму културната и јазичната разноликост. На прашањето за блокадата од Бугарија на Северна Македонија, со тоа и на Албанија, беше посветен значаен дел од дискусиите на конференцијата.
When it does what it is asked, and the European Union doesn't follow through the first time, as happened in 2019 when France blocked North Macedonia from opening, that is, correctly as it was called, a historic mistake. When it does it a second time, as is now with the situation with Bulgaria, that's a betrayal. That's a betrayal. And it is a betrayal of European values, and it's a betrayal of any type of respect that you want from Americans, and the nature of the, quote, partnership with the European Union over the Balkans, it's a betrayal of that. And the idea that EU is going to take over the Balkans and continue this path, it's a farcical. And if the EU aspires to that, and that's the vision, strategic autonomy, we're a rival, we're a world power. You have to sort out these problems, and this is my third point. They are soluble. These problems in the region are soluble. It's so difficult. Kosovo is so difficult. Bosnia is so... It is not. It is not that difficult. It's not simple. It's not easy. But Nicola and his counterparts proved it can be done. The key condition is that the European Union is unified.
What our American friend comfortably forgets is that one difference with Europe is that Alabama has no veto right over the foreign policy in Washington towards Honduras. Bulgaria has. It's called the rule of law. Whether you like it or not, those are our rules, and Bulgaria is using it. Rule of law for me is much more important than a word like respect, which I usually reserve for mafia bosses. The other big difference with the United States is that the already great European experiment got a whole new dimension with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And since then, we are in an enormous development that is nearing its completion to get Europe prosperous and to get it secure. And that means make these countries members of NATO and make them members of the European Union. In the meantime, not the United States of America, but we have been cleaning up the mess in Europe left behind by the communists. Not only with words, with enormous amounts of money. And that massive support has stretched also to this region. So now to talk about betrayal and abandoning when we fail to meet one date, when there is one hiccup in the road. Look at the past years and the progress that has been made. What is worrying, though, is that a recent poll in this country showed that 56% of the people are of the opinion that the government cannot achieve its goals without outside pressure. This is a country that has been independent for a generation and is a sovereign state. And this is a basic problem in this region that somehow, unlike, let's say, the Baltic region, it doesn't manage to be the master of its own destiny. There is a Chinese saying that says, "Why do you hate me? I didn't help you." And we are here standing in the middle of this, absolutely ready to help where we can, absolutely determined to get this region inside the European Union. But to talk about historical mistakes and betrayal is, well, it is absurd.
Ова е темата во фокусот и на содржините што ги подготвивме за вас од Охрид во ова издание на 360 степени. Ке видите интервјуа со тројца релевантни соговорници. Помошник државниот секретар на САД Филип Рикер, министерот за надворешни работи на Австрија Александер Шаленберг и европратеничката од Словенија Тања Фајон, чија држава од вчера председава со Советот на Европската унија. Останете на Алсат, вообичаено ќе одиме на реклами, па ќе ги видите најавените содржини. Гледате 360 степени. Објавивме во генералната најава, ова издание го реализираме од Охрид, каде денеска и вчера се одржа голема меѓународна конференција, Преспа форум за диалог. Еден од највпечатливите гости на настанот беше шефот за Европа и Евроазија во американскиот Стейт Департмент Филип Рикер, кој е одличен познавач на состојбите на Западен Балкан и во Северна Македонија. Тој од 2008 до 2011 беше американски амбасадор во земјава, од 1997 до 2000 година дипломат задолжен за односи со јавност во амбасадата на САД во Скопје. Рикер во Охрид даде интервју за 360 степени во кој разговараме за бугарската блокада, за тоа дали САД навистина прават се што можат за да се деблокира евроинтеграцијскиот процес на Северна Македонија, за реформската динамика во земјава, извршната наредба на председателот Бајден, улогата на ВМРО ДПМН. Да го видиме интервјуто со помошник државниот секретар на САД. Господине Рикер, благодарам за ова интервју. Заминавте од тогаш поранешната Југословенска република Македонија во 2011 како амбасадор, иако САД ја имаа признаено оваа земја под уставното име. 10 години подоцна како помошник државен секретар на САД сте овде во Северна Македонија. Ако ги споредувате состојбите во земјата тогаш и сега, што би рекле?
Здраво, Vasco. It's really a pleasure to be here back in Ohrid, one of my favorite places. I feel very much at home in Ohrid, and I'm very positive about the developments we've seen here in North Macedonia. I'm ending a long trip that started almost 2 weeks ago, and I accompanied Secretary of State Blinken on an important European trip that was a mix of multilateral and bilateral engagements where he could stress President Biden's focus on strengthening our relations with our European partners and allies. Of course, the President himself was just a couple of weeks ago in Brussels for the NATO summit, and there at the same table was the Prime Minister of North Macedonia. That's an enormous accomplishment in a decade, and I'm very proud of that. We're very proud to have North Macedonia as our ally, and I think it signifies just how far the country has come in this period. There's lots more to do. People are energized. They want to see further reform and development, and we, the United States, along with so many European partners, are with you.
Го споменавте членството во НАТО, тоа беше овозможено со договорот од Преспа, но на Преспа се гледаше и како на жртва за најмалку почеток на преговорите со Европската унија. Тоа во овој момент не се случува.
The Prespa agreement was a remarkable achievement, a real example of courageous, pragmatic diplomacy that removed one of the biggest roadblocks ahead for Euro-Atlantic integration, and we've come a long way since then. North Macedonia is on the track to begin the negotiations for EU membership. I'm confident that will happen. We have made very clear to the Bulgarian government, as have EU members across the board, our views and that this process needs to move forward. I just came from Albania, where they too are waiting to begin the next step, but we're confident that that will happen. Diplomacy can make such a difference in helping countries find ways to resolve problems and move ahead. And with Prespa, you see just what that's meant in terms of relations with Greece, broader relations in the region. This is what President Biden talks about when he says we need to focus on using institutions, using diplomacy to move ahead. There are great challenges in the world, and none of us, including the United States, can resolve them on our own. We need to do it with friends, with partners, with allies.
Една од дилемите во овдешната јавност е дали, да речеме, земите членки на ЕУ, па и САД, прават се што можат за да се деблокира пристапниот процес на Северна Македонија во Европската унија.
There is enormous support for North Macedonia, and you see it here in Ohrid at this Prespa Forum dialogue. The number of countries, the number of leaders, the number of influential diplomats who are coming here, I think demonstrates the strong support that North Macedonia has. And certainly from Washington, you've seen the messages of President Biden, who is a longtime friend of this region and this country, of Secretary Blinken, who made very clear at the various multilateral fora that he's been at this week in Europe that we want to see this region move ahead, and we're lending all of our support to that.
Бидејќи стоењето во место им отвора простор прво на антизападни, антидемократски структури во земјата, но исто така и дополнително придонесува за стагнирање на реформските процеси во Северна Македонија.
North Macedonia is very much part of the West. North Macedonia is a member, one of 30 allies in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the most successful defensive security organization in history. And that means something. And North Macedonia did a tremendous amount of work on reform on behalf of its citizens to meet the requirements for that membership. And I'm very confident that the country will continue to move ahead in the right direction in broader Euro-Atlantic integration, particularly as we emerge from the COVID pandemic. It's a time when we have to focus on economic regeneration and growth. The president is very focused on that, on resilience, and we're going to have to do this together. And that's the message that the Biden administration is delivering, and that's why the president and the secretary have sent me here to Ohrid to speak at this forum.
Дали од перспектива на Вашингтон, Северна Македонија се уште е на линијата на огнот, како што своевремено изјави Џон Кери?
North Macedonia is a member of NATO, and that provides a security that the president underscored in terms of Article 5 and everything else that NATO does. The United States and the rest of the allies are very appreciative of North Macedonia's contributions, hosting exercises, participating, adding to our broader common security. The NATO summit showed that we need to update the alliance for the next decade and beyond to deal with new and emerging threats like cyber and hybrid threats, to deal with China and consider the challenges as well as the opportunities that China provides, and to deal with other threats to the region. We're in this together, and that's how we'll move forward.
Бевте амбасадор во оваа земја во време кога почна демократска стагнација. Се чини дека и со актуелната влада на Заев, владењето на правото, борбата против корупцијата остануваат најпредизвикувачките прашања. Дали мислите дека се потребни сепак и појасни и посилни пораки и од ЕУ и од САД во однос на тоа дека не е доволно да се биде само про-преспа, про-решение со Бугарија, туку дека мора и внатре да се работи на демократските реформи?
The most important messages, I think, come from your own citizens. Citizens want to elect officials who they can count on to deliver for them. That's the challenge in any democracy. And President Biden has been very clear that countering corruption, speaking out about good governance, will be main themes in U.S. foreign policy. And we count on our allies, like North Macedonia, to join us in those efforts worldwide. You'll have seen a new executive order for the Western Balkans, which President Biden moved forward to update old orders to expand on where we are and make very clear our position about dealing with corruption that undermines the very values that we share and the very principles that are so critical to the institutions and the rules-based order that is important not only for our security but for our prosperity moving forward.
Ја споменавте извршната наредба на председателот Бајден и проширувањето на незиниот опфат со договорот од Преспа со борбата против корупцијата. Дилемите овде се дали ќе остане ова на закан или е можно и да видиме и нови лица на листата.
One can't know. I mean, these are tools that we have, that the administration, that the president puts forward to use in implementing our foreign policy and focusing on what we think is important. And again, it comes back to our belief, our strong belief in the importance of the rules-based international order, the institutions, including NATO, that we help build, that have preserved for us in the transatlantic community and frankly around the world a period of stability, of peace, and great prosperity. We've had ups, we've had downs, we'll have more ups and downs, including things like the COVID pandemic. But the president has focused on COVID, and in foreign policy, he's focusing on repairing some of our relationships, revitalizing our alliances, and that included, even during COVID, making sure that North Macedonia's membership became real. I was very honored to be part of the team that accepted the papers, the documents that made North Macedonia the 30th member of NATO.
Завршуваме. За ВМРО ДПМНЕ своевремено имавте порака дека е време да запрат политичките игри. Контекстот тогаш беше нивното одбивање да се продолжи мандатот на тогашното СЈО, да се усвои тој закон и така натаму. Како гледате на улогата и однесувањето на ВМРО ДПМНЕ денес, меѓу другото имајќи го предвид и нивниот однос кон договорот од Преспа?
Well, the Prespa agreement is a done deal, and we here, many from the international community, have come to Ohrid to celebrate and underscore the importance of Prespa and what it represents. It has made a significant difference, not only removing roadblocks, but allowing for increased cooperation within the region, for energy security, for trade, for investment. This is, again, a long chapter, but with great opportunities. And you just look at the terrific relationship that North Macedonia and Greece have developed in all spheres, from defense and security as allies to economic opportunities. And that's going to be even more important as we emerge from COVID, focus on economic rebuilding, focus on supply chains and resilience. And that's what the future is about. It's about moving forward, not looking back. It's about working together, not about party lines and ideologies, but moving the country forward together.
Благодарам за овој интервју.
Always a pleasure.
Ова беше разговорот со високиот американски дипломат Филип Рикер, кој вели дека е убеден и Северна Македонија ќе ги почне преговорите со Европската унија и дека САД јасно и кажале на бугарската влада оти овој процес треба да напредува. Оваа тема доминира и во интервјуто со следниот наш соговорник во Охрид, министерот за надворешни работи на Австрија Александер Шаленберг. Австрија е меѓу спонзорите на европската интеграција на државите од регионот. Едно поради географската положба, а што е уште поважно поради своите политички и економски интереси овде. Колегата Владимир Мирчевски водеше отворен разговор со шефот на австриската дипломатија за сериозно подкопаниот кредибилитет на ЕУ во регионот со неможноста да се испорача почеток на преговори со Северна Македонија и со Албанија. Ќе го слушнете и одговорот на Шаленберг на прашањето кога е следната шанса за земјава?
Minister, is there an understanding among EU member states that the Union is significantly losing its credibility here in the Western Balkans by manifesting a lack of power, not being able to start accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania?
Well, I would say that an ongoing discussion, and we see this danger, absolutely, and we from the side of Austria, we want to start accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania. We even think it's overdue. We should have done already so in the past, and we are constantly working on this. As I always say, this is not the European backyard, as some people say. It's actually a European patio. It's surrounded by EU member states. There's no region which is more European than the Western Balkans. And we Austrians have very close ties, emotionally, humanly, economically, politically. So for us, it would be the most natural thing to have you as partners and full members in the European Union.
What about the credibility issue?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is an issue. I still believe that the majority of the member states absolutely stand behind the opening of accession talks. It's actually, I would say, nearly 26, if not 26 member states doing so. We are aware that there are issues, and I know the Portuguese presidency has worked very hard on these issues. And I have high expectations for the Slovenian presidency that it will continue these efforts. And I would still say for this region there's only one perspective, and it is a European one because it's an European region. And for Europe as well, it's our self-interest. It's our self-interest to have the Western Balkans as full members of the European Union.
You mentioned nearly 26 member states. That brings me to my other question, because there's a feeling that Bulgarian blockade is silently approved by some member states of the Union that are against further EU enlargement.
I don't believe that. What I see is that there's a growing impatience, but bilateral issues should not hamper and block accession negotiations. We all have hundreds of bilateral issues. I come from a region, Central Europe, which is just as rich in history and in sort of open questions as is Southeastern Europe. And still, we managed to enlarge in 2004 to have our neighbors joining the European Union. And there should be no mixing up between bilateral issues, historical issues, and the accession process to the European Union.
Although the messages coming from European Union member states is that, yes, we are for enlargement because open door policy, conditionality, the best tool to stabilize this region, it seems like that maybe not all of the member states are using all of the tools and instruments available to make enlargement more positive process.
No, you are absolutely right that there was a time when probably there was a sense of, as you call, enlargement fatigue, that a number of capitals had second thoughts, but I believe the tide is changing. And the way I look at it, and I have the feeling that more and more member states see it the same way, in politics there's no vacuum. So if we Europeans, we as European Union, big difference, we as European Union would turn our backs, then others would move in. It would be China or Russia or Turkey or others. And this is a European region. We have no interest in that. So in geopolitical terms, it's actually a question of it's either our way of life or somebody else's way of life, which imposes itself here. And I believe that this is a thinking which is growing in the European Union. And in the last meetings in the European Union, the Council, there was a growing frustration with the fact that we cannot advance on opening accession talks with Albania and North Macedonia, because frankly, you guys have done everything you had to do, and you deserve it.
Is Bulgaria isolated on these talks?
I would say so.
What do you personally think of this Skopje-Sofia issue raised by Bulgaria? And for example, one of their demands is that as a country, have to acknowledge that the Macedonian language has Bulgarian roots.
I don't want to go into the details of these things. I can repeat what I said beforehand. Austria, we share hundreds of years of common history with Bohemia, Moravia, with Hungary, with Slovenia, and South Tyrol. And we still managed to join the European Union and have our neighbors joining the European Union. This is not the right process and the right framework to bring up these issues. That you have to talk to each other, that you have to find some kind of common understanding, and that you should avoid any language, anything which could hurt your neighbor. This is something which is a logical thing, but it has nothing to do with the accession process. And I have the feeling that Skopje has really done a lot already on this matter. And that you're aware that you have neighbors and that, there are open questions you have to deal with. But I don't want to go into details because this is something you have to figure out with your Bulgarian neighbors and friends. And I would say they're Bulgarian friends. You're so close to each other. Because it's probably part of the problem.
You won't go into details because the devil is in the details.
I know, the devil is in the details, but as I'm saying, this should not be an issue which is an EU issue. Then I wouldn't like to comment on each detail, but I believe there was a very sensitive proposal by the Portuguese EU presidency, which I had the impression went very far to satisfy, these needs from Bulgaria to have a certain sense of security. And I would have hoped, and I still hope, that this is a deal which would be acceptable for the next Bulgarian government.
When do you see the chance for the next breakthrough in this process?
I believe the next window of opportunity is after the elections in July. And then in the moment we have a government, I believe we should push very hard. And I'm aware that Prime Minister Zaev himself has reached out to the political parties, so that I believe everybody in Bulgarian politics is aware that this is an issue where they are watched by the European Union partners, by the US, and by the other partners in the Western Balkans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Словенија од вчера го презеде од Португалија председавањето со Советот на Европската Унија. Португалците вложија напори, но финишираа со несреќната изјава на државната секретарка за Европа Ана Паула Закаријаш дека, како што рече северномакедонскиот јазик, некогаш бил дел од бугарскиот. Следуваа објаснување дека тоа не е официјалната позиција на Лисабон, но ехото од изјавата на Закаријаш е посилно од нив. Сега е на словенците околу кои има надежи, но и задршки поради и либералните тенденции на тамошната влада предводена од Јанез Јанша, идеолошки и политички сојузник на Виктор Орбан. Во Охрид беше европратеничката од Словенија Тања Фајон, која доаѓа од опозицијската левица. Со неја разговараме за односот на ЕУ кон регионот и што може да се очекува од словенечкото председателство.
Ms. Fajon, in one of your panels, you mentioned that the key word when you describe the relationship between European Union and the Western Balkans is trust. But it seems like now the citizens of North Macedonia and Albania are losing trust in European Union, who has not delivered on its promises.
I am very concerned because European Union is losing its credibility, and of course people of the Western Balkans are using hope and vision. But the trust, I think, it's a key to start developing better relations and more confidence on all sides. I mean, certainly I understand the frustration of people in North Macedonia or even in Albania or today in Kosovo, because there were a lot of promises made, but countries are still waiting for the next step. So it's often we are witnessing egoism, selfishness, or political campaign elections in some of the member states that are jeopardizing the progress of the countries, and that has to stop. I think we are at a maybe last crucial moment on the crossroad how we go on, not only on the future of Europe, but also the future of the enlargement to the Western Balkans. If we are frank, the condition in the Balkans or in the European Union or with the enlargement is not good. So I hope sincerely that during this half of the year, when Slovenia took over the presidency, we'll do some significant steps, because after that, if we don't deliver what we promised, I think we lost maybe all the precious time that is still left.
Trust, credibility. Is there awareness in the European Union that it's losing its leverage, almost lost its leverage here in the Balkans?
I mean, European Union is going through several changes, or not changes, challenges, through different crises in the past. Enlargement was not very high on the agenda. If you would ask today European citizens or the governments, maybe we would all be surprised how do they feel about the enlargement. It's lack of trust, certainly, maybe also lack of commitment, even on the side of the Western Balkans. We really have to see the reforms when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to democracy, fight against corruption, fight against organized crime, reforming public administration, freedom of media, and so on, all what are always criticism. And the governments in the Western Balkans, maybe in the absence of a strong European policy, didn't prove significant progress. I'm excluding here North Macedonia because it can be a bright example. We managed to achieve here with the government of Zaev an historical agreement, which was extremely difficult, politically sensitive, but it proved that big compromises or difficult compromises can be done if all sides are committed to make a step forward.
But why making compromises on very difficult issues like North Macedonia when there is no carrot at the end of the road? And let's say now we had the problem with Greece. Now there is the issue with Bulgaria. What's your personal opinion about this new issue with Bulgaria, with Sofia, which looks like that one member state of the European Union is misusing the powers of the Union?
I'm very disappointed about the behavior of Bulgaria, about this egoism or selfishness is extremely wrong and irresponsible. And I do hope that we'll manage to convince Bulgaria what is at stake and really find a compromise and agreement. Because we cannot, because of national interests or gaining political points in the national environment, jeopardize the future of a neighboring country, which is happening today. So it is an important time ahead of us. Not everything has been lost. I don't want to be pessimistic, I am realist, but we have to fight further, because one thing for me is very clear. The Western Balkans has always been part of Europe, and it will always be. We share our continent and we share global challenges. So we need each other to fight that together, and we have to bring this continent strong and united together.
You mentioned Slovenian presidency. What can we expect in the next 6 months?
I'm glad to see that the Slovene government put Western Balkan as one of the priorities. I support the ambitious agenda, which would be the best possible outcome. And I hope with the help of 4 European partners we'll manage to open and start accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania, and also deliver what we promised 3 years ago, visa liberalization for Kosovo. Somehow to reconnect business, economies, people-to-people contacts, bring trust back, not only inside the region, but also in the institutions and in the European Union. I wish to see that the friends from the Western Balkans will be part of the discussion on the future of Europe. We are trying to achieve that in Brussels, in the European Parliament. This is a debate that is now ongoing with our civil society, with citizens, and it's a shame to see that the Western Balkan is not included. It's an opportunity that we really show we are all part of this continent. We should discuss together about our future.
There are some concerns about Slovenian presidency. On one hand, there is a declarative will for European values and enlargement, but on the other hand, there are a lot of concerns because of the illiberal tendencies of the government in Ljubljana.
I share those concerns because we receive nowadays a lot of criticism from Brussels, from foreign diplomats, from foreign media as regards the rule of law in Slovenia, as regards the freedom of media. It is a black cloud on the first day of Slovenian presidency. So we will have, the government will have to work very hard to repair the catastrophic year, if I say so, in relation to respect of European values. So I'm really critical to what our government is doing back in Slovenia, and being the presidency country, you have to respect the European values. So this is where I see worries, and I hope that we'll manage to repair this very catastrophic and bad year. Not appointing European prosecutors. We got criticism of political interference in the freedom of media and so on. And society is deeply polarized and also disappointed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Со интервјуто со Тања Фајон ги исцрпуваме содржините снимени во Охрид. По паузата за реклами ќе ја видиме новата саботажа, а јас тука ќе се одјавам, ќе ви се заблагодарам за вниманието и ќе најавам дека повторно ќе се видиме здравје по летните одмори во првата половина на септември со нова сезона на 360 степени на Alsat. Останете со добро здравје.
Откриен е моделот преку кој ќе се влие на намалувањето на урбанизацијата. Не се потребни специјални студии, комплексни програми, бидејќи до целта очигледно се стигнува само ако на жителите на една рурална средина им се создадат услови за да може да си се променат.
Соблекувалната во село Марена значи прородување на село Марена
Природбата може ке стаси подалеку и на сцена да се појави политичар во повој кој како да излегол од гардероберот во кој бил обесен шинелот на Тупурковски. Овој не го открива идентитетот на човекот, ама барем ја кажува државата од која ќе долетаат милиардите.
Имам, еве јавно ќе кажам, имам човек не милионер, билионер од Малезија, султанот каде што сака да ги помогне ромите во Република Македонија, во цела Република Македонија, во цела држава, но за жал ја сега не го носам, еве јавно викам, не го носам сега, не сум будала, ќе го носам кога ќе бидам ја градоначалник.
Во ова сценарио веројатно треба и да се поверува и тоа не го кажува кој било туку политичка фигура која има неверојатна комуникацијска способност, што во муабет кој трае 40 минути. Речи си 30 пати повторува едно исто. За таа специфика не постои енциклопедиска дефиниција, а дури ниту нарцизам, како нешто најблиско, не може да се каже дека е адекватен збор.
Затоа, јас сум тој, Геге Демировски, дека Геге Демировски, но за жал Геге Демировски вака, Геге Демировски нема да дозволи Геге. За жал Геге Демировски, еве Геге вика, јас сум Геге Демировски. Зашто Геге Демировски, не разбираш тоа? Еве јас сум Геге Демировски. Тогаш значи ако не постои Геге и од Геге Демировски тежи и затоа повеќе Геге Демировски. Ти што ме го почитуваш Геге Демировски? Не разбираш тоа? Нема да дозволи Геге Демировски, чекај да го трнеме Геге Демировски, пак ќе викам, Геге Демировски, лично од мене, како Геге Демировски. Брат, Геге вика, не разбираш тоа?
Ваквото само акцентирање заслужува искрена пофалба за разлика од чудните забелешки на опозицијата која наместо критика кон власта и премиерот решава јавно да се расфрла со комплименти, со кои не може да се пофали баш секој македонски политичар.
И практично се претвара во она што за жал многу доцна видовме дека е обичен извршител на потребите или политиките на некои многу повлијателни земји. Например? Па да речеме, например, од Соединените Американски држави.
Добро, не е секој близок со Западот, има такви кои дзиркаат и кон исток, ама никако да се снајдат со документите што им се потребни за да погодат во центар. Конфузијата се уште на високо ниво, па по збунувачките акти со кој побара за да не добие суспензија, сега никому не му е јасно. Дали само сам си сака пак, или пак е нечи претендент.
Вчера ја поднесов и кандидатурата до општинската организација и со тоа ги официјално ја прифатив кандидатурата од мојата матична општинска.
И на крајот, за оние кои сакаат да го вратат времето, ама не се сигурни дали е уште рано или е веќе доцна.
4 години не се малку. 4 години си пројдува вака, како што се вели како ден.
Бргу или споро, нашето време, барем за оваа сезона, истече.